हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम, वेलकम टू अनदर एपिसोड ऑफ द पाकिस्तान एक्सपीरियंस। और मैं काफी टाइम से इनको बुलाना चाह रहा था, लेकिन अब क्योंकि 14 अगस्त करीब आ रहा है तो मेरे बड़े पर्सनल वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट है, क्योंकि खुद मैं एक पॉडकास्ट करना चाह रहा हूँ ओरल हिस्ट्रीज पर। तो मैं सोचा कि मैं रीच आउट करूं और खुद सीखूं। सो आई वांटेड दिस फ्री मास्टर क्लास, तो मैंने पॉडकास्ट कर लिया ताकि ये फ्री मास्टर क्लास मिल जाए। अनम जकरिया, हाउ यू डूइंग?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. I really want to get into your work, लेकिन अभी मैं सोशल मीडिया देख के थोड़ा सा काफी अफेक्टेड भी हूँ कि वी रिजेक्ट डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस 2021 बिल ट्रेंड हो रहा है। सो आई नो हिस्ट्री बड़ी डायलेक्टिक होती है और स्वीपिंग स्टेटमेंट्स यू अवॉइड जनरली, बट डू यू सी एनी ट्रेंड के ये जो रेडिकलाइजेशन हमें इस हद तक ले आई है? एक अजम्पशन होता है कि हम तो हमेशा से ऐसे ही थे, हम तो हमेशा से अर्तुगरुल ही थे, हम तो हमेशा से मोहम्मद बिन कासिम थे। बट यू सी अ ट्रेंड के वी आर हेडेड टुवर्ड्स मे बी much more radicalized youth on both sides of the border now?
I'm concerned about that. Definitely. I think um, ये चीजें बहुत पहले शुरू हुई हैं. Of course, इसमें बहुत colonialism का role है. Then partition itself crystallizing identities. But post-partition years में आप देखें तो ये identities बहुत ज़्यादा further crystallize हो गई हैं. And I think our nationalism and idea of the self is now premised on this otherization, right? अब वो other across the border हो या वो other, within your own nation हो, and across, of course, caste and class and gender. But I'm really worried about that. I think again, no sweeping statements, but it is very concerning where we're heading. Yeah.
I know again ये थोड़ी शायद simplistic take हो, but आयशा जलाल के एक बहुत अच्छा कोट है कि हमने हिस्ट्री को रिप्लेस कर दिया विद आइडियोलॉजी। आई थिंक व्हाट वी आर टॉट इसके नहीं, हम तो हमेशा से ही एक अलग चीज थे। सो द अदराइजेशन दैट यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, देयर इट इज otherizing, it's present verb, it's happening, but they make it seem like it was always so.
No, I mean, not at all. I think बिल्कुल, I completely agree with Dr. Jalal कि हम history नहीं पढ़ते, हम ideology पढ़ते हैं. And इसमें Pakistan studies का बहुत हाथ है. I'm more than happy to talk about that, especially post 1971, our textbooks being revised. But I think the process started much earlier. I think the process started with colonialism. The process started with labeling people for election politics and all of that. कि आप define कर दें कि आप हिंदू हैं तो आप सिख हैं, and आप Muslim हैं, and what does that mean? And then I think these notions get internalized. They get internalized by Muslims, they get internalized by Hindus as well, that we have always been these two separate nations. And I think वो फिर politically इस्तेमाल भी होता है, and then then we are in the situation we are in today where we only read ideology, unfortunately. History पे बहुत कम focus है, and that's a big problem. Yeah.
You've written a book on Kashmir, you've written a book on 1971, you've written a book on 1947. कोई easy topics आप लेती नहीं है। आई थिंक एक कोई T20 वर्ल्ड कप पे लिख लें कि सब फैंस के क्या एक्सपीरियंस थे। So that's something less, maybe actually more controversial, but we're gonna get into all three. लेकिन सबसे जो पॉपुलर सवाल था on YouTube was, इन्होंने इतनी कम उम्र में 3 बुक्स कैसे लिखी? So how did you manage to do that?
I think these books have all been, for me, very personal projects. These were topics that I was interested in, I wanted to know more about. And I think one led to the other. It's been very much an unlearning process, because maybe Pakistan mein badi hui hu, I've studied from the same textbooks. I have grown up with the same kind of prejudice and bias, the otherization process. And I think the moment where things shifted for me was with my introduction to oral histories. I didn't really know about oral histories, even though our families may, our grandparents are always kind of telling us stories. वो हमारे South Asia में एक बहुत rich tradition है of storytelling. But it was when I started working with the Citizens Archive, उनका oral history program था, that I began to realize how much I did not know. And I think that was a critical moment for me. And that just got me on this journey of recording these oral histories. पहले partition पे काम किया और Punjab पे काम किया. And I really thought that, I think to some extent, even till today, things are shifting now, but ज़्यादातर partition के बारे में हम सोचते हैं तो through Punjab's lens. So I thought I had done this work and I understood partition. But after I published the book, I realized how little I really knew. And I also realized कि जब तक कश्मीर को मैं बेहतर नहीं समझूंगी, तो I won't understand partition, because you have to see the ways in which it remains ongoing. The violence remains ongoing in Kashmir. So that took me to Kashmir. And once I was in Kashmir, I realized कि अभी India-Pakistan की जो policies हैं with Kashmir, in Kashmir, you can't really understand them till you understand 71. So for me, it's just been one project leading me to another, one book leading to another book. And it's just been topics I've been curious about. I want to learn. I want to speak with people who maybe lived through that time, who can give me another history, जो हमें किताबों में नहीं मिलती, conventional textbooks and conventional sources of history में कहीं भी नहीं होंगी. Stories of ordinary people, and multiple experiences across caste, gender, and so forth. So that's how this has happened.
I know you've written 3 books, and मैं भी लिखता रहता हूँ, तो हम भी उनके trope में फंस गए हैं थोड़े. But what are your thoughts on this notion that the primacy of the written word is also a colonial idea? कि हम अपनी history को कमतर समझते हैं, या हम इनकी किताबें पढ़ते हैं ये अपने आप को define करने के लिए. बहुत अच्छी किताब भी है शाहराम की, recommending define and rule, कि वो define करते हैं. तो ये जो primacy of the written word, do you think that's also part of the colonial project के oral tradition को वो कमतर समझते हैं या कुछ भी नहीं समझते?
I think so. And I also think it's very interesting that the return to oral history is now coming. It started in Britain again, then in Europe again, that we need to record these oral histories. So it's very interesting. But bilkul, I think कि हम written word को ज़्यादा अहमियत देते हैं. We see that as more credible. And there has been, over time, a dismissing of these other histories, these other ways of telling history, these other forms of storytelling and narration. And I think it's critical to go back to them, because written में वो चीज़ जो oral से translate होके written में आ रही है, it is in many ways losing its essence, and you can only get so much in the written form. I think the two also complement each other. So it is now a lot of times people say, oral history is not credible, nahi, aap us pe kyun kaam karte hain? I have lots of responses to that, but I think it is not about one history or the other history.
इसको हम clip out करेंगे ना, इसकी हम clip बनाएंगे. And I'm response to historians. Says your history is bullshit, actually.
No. I think, why do we have to narrow ourselves? Why do we have to confine ourselves to one type of history or one kind of recording of history, right? Like, why can't we access multiple forms of storytelling in history? I think that would be very exciting. Yeah.
I think चलें इस पे थोड़ा एक nuanced take. Aisha Jalal was on the podcast, and she said it's important to tell, and I may be butchering her thoughts, so please don't pin them on her, but जो मुझे समझ में आया was कि yes, you can tell what happened at the margins, but it's important to history in as so far as it contributes to the main narrative. कि margins पे जो हो रहा है वो main narrative या main story को कैसे forward लेके जाता है, वो important है ज़्यादा, as opposed to telling the margins for what it is. You can still do that, but that maybe doesn't do much as to retelling the objective history, so and so. What are your thoughts about that idea?
So, my thoughts, I actually personally feel, and this is just speaking for myself, कि I don't know if I really believe in objective history anymore. I really like Urvashi Bhattalia's work. I've learned so much from her. And one of the things she says is that even, facts are not self-evident givens, right? They too have been recorded and told by somebody. So even within हम जो quote unquote objective history समझते हैं, उसको भी किसी ने लिखा है, किसी perspective से लिखा है, and there are often multiple perspectives if you kind of dig deeper into that history. So that's something I think about a lot now, कि, objectivity होती क्या है, and what is, and how can more subjective experiences come forth. I do believe absolutely that the history of the margins can further and can contribute to the main history, if you want to call it that. But I also think that history off the margin, at the margin, is as important, and in fact can tell us other histories which may never have been there in the main text, because they were just not deemed as important to record. I mean, we know, again, going back to Urvashi Bhattalia, when she wrote The Other Side of Silence in the 90s, that's one of the first times that we're actually recording women's experiences at partition in that way. Right? So, abhi us waqt tak jo historiography thi, that was very gendered in a sense, very masculine historiography. So a lot of times the history at the margins is critical history, is essential history, and I would say is as important as any other form of history so far been recorded.
Yeah. You went to Lahore American School, right?
No, I went to, well, LGS and then other multiple schools, Cardinal, Lucas, yeah.
So, I mean, the reason I'm asking is कि मेरी schooling भी पाकिस्तान में हुई थी, and I think a really unfortunate thing that schools in Pakistan, I don't know if LGS did it, but मेरे school ने बहुत किया था, and it's only when I went for my master's that I had to unlearn that. They really brought the stick down if you used I. If you put yourself into your work, it was seen as a negative thing. It's almost like के वो जो veneer of objectivity है, मतलब एक sixth grader एक ऐसे लिख रहा है, of course वो मतलब कोई encyclopedia entry नहीं डाल रहा. It's better for them to give a subjective lens. You really put yourself into the work. And I think maybe एक old school mentality, at least मेरे schooling में जो है, would see that as a negative thing. Did you have to unlearn a lot of things that you learned at school to develop a writing style where you were part of your research? Very much so.
That's a great question.
That's what I do. It's kind of my thing.
No, that's a really, really good question. I haven't thought about that for a very long time, but yes, I think there were a lot of questions I had to my partition wali kitab likh rahi thi that, you know, does it make sense for me to put myself here? You know, I think there was a time where I was getting very kind of fixated on ke ye objective hai ya nahi, and you know, is it do I have enough stories to put out there? Does it even make sense to publish a book? Am I making some grand claim over here? And I had to take a back step, and a lot of conversations with friends really helped. Kind of going, you know, I think unlearning. You need to be in conversation with people for some of that unlearning to take place. And I think that's where I realized, you know, friends pointing out that you don't, you know, these histories are as valid, and it is very like my own kind of my own process of that unlearning is also important, because in many ways it's not just my process either. I think, as you're saying, you know, a lot of us have grown up with certain narratives, and at some point in time, hopefully some point in time, started to question those narratives. So I also wanted to bring that in. I wanted to bring in a very honest critique of myself, like what am I going in with, and then what am I coming out with, and how is that shifting things for me? But I do have to say that this was a lot easier for me with the partition book, because my family has a partition story. So I felt like in some ways it was my story to tell. जब मैं कश्मीर वाली किताब लिख रही थी, I had a lot more questions then, because फिर positionality आती है आपकी, like I'm not Kashmiri, right? So how do I put myself in here? I'm recording these narratives. I don't want to become a representative. I don't think I can. I don't think I should, right? And now how do I put myself in here? Now how do my subjective questions not kind of overshadow what people are saying is important to hear. So I think it's not something I've fully figured out. I think with every new, you know, work that I'm doing, these questions are raised, and there are different forms of unlearning. And one of them is the subjectivity, like, should I bring myself in? Is this okay? I think I'm increasingly comfortable with that. I think it is really important to do that. I think that even in the Kashmir book, it actually really helped, because then it was not about me teaching Kashmir to anyone. I can't. It was me, you know, unlearning my own kind of Kashmir narrative, status narrative, state narrative, jingoistic narrative, and then saying, well, here's what I knew, and here's what people are saying, and this is transforming the way I think about this place. This is my journey. I'm just bringing that in alongside people's narratives. So I think it's become a very critical tool for me. It's there on all my books now, and I don't know how to take myself out of it.
That's great, but it's cards on the table, right? This is where I'm coming from. This is the lens I have. This is how I'm seeing it. वो अगर आप ना भी करें, तो आपके काम में reflect होगा. By putting your cards on the table, वो ऑब्जेक्टिविटी और न्यूट्रलिटी बड़े बज़वर्ड्स हैं जो हम गलत इस्तेमाल करते हैं. People think even as a moderator you should absolutely be neutral, you should give Trump the equal time as Biden. No, if one of them is asking for his supporters to attack the Capitol and the other one is also problematic, it doesn't mean कि आप उसको equate कर सकते हैं. So by putting yourself out there that this is where I'm coming from, this is how I see it, and then even when it also allows people to read against the grain. Oh, ये शायद इस bias से आ रही है, so this is why she focused on this. whereas maybe she could have focused on that. But you're giving them that license, or you're giving them that this is just one piece of the mosaic. I'm not giving you the entire puzzle. I'm not pretending that it is.
No, I don't want to pretend that it is. And I also think that we all carry our bias into our work. We all carry our preconceived notions. And I have in no way worked through all of them. But I want to be kind of honest where that unlearning is taking place during an interview or during a particular place that I'm visiting, like when I visited Bangladesh. And now I'm learning new things and I'm starting to see that history in a different light. I want to share that. I want to share as much as I can, as aware as I am of, okay, you know, I carried this notion with me and now something is happening, it is being challenged. What is that process like for me? So I think that becomes really important. Yeah.
So हम थोड़े woke तो हो गए हैं. We've learned how to criticize the colonial lens or the colonial construct, but I also see it's a completely different format. But these vlogs or documentaries, a lot of times शहर से लोग जब गांव जाते हैं, वो भी एक थोड़ा colonial तो नहीं है, but urban, let's say urban lens लेके, urban biases लेकर. So उधर power dynamics बहुत होते हैं कि उनके काम में it's almost like they're speaking down to those people. So when you're recording these oral histories, how do you avoid that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I can just say what I think I do, and I hope I'm able to do it. But I think really about important hota hai to build I build a relationship, and I do go in with some kind of sense of what I want to, you know, speak about. But for a very long time now, moved away from structured interviews. Jahan pe mere paas questions, you know, likhe ho, because I feel like that assumes that I know. And I've learned over time that I usually don't know, that I'm usually wrong. So one of the things I try to do now is kind of go in and let people tell me what they feel is important to tell me. And I'm there as a listener as much as I can be. You know, I think listening is so critical. Listening to the silences is so critical. Listening to the body language is so critical, especially if you're doing oral history work. So I do try to do that as less, you know, bring in as less as possible preconceived notions and structured ways of questioning people, because that's assuming a lot of things about them. Inko ye nahi pata hoga. And that's not true. That's actually never true in my experience. So I go in as somebody very comfortable with the idea that I probably don't know. Mera is cheez mein interest hai. I want to know more, but only you can tell me what is worth knowing. What is important in your life, in your personal story that you think is worth speaking to me about. And I'm also very conscious. I try to be of my Punjabi and Pakistani kind of identity and my privilege. But yeah, I think this is something to constantly be thinking about, because the minute you think I'm done with it, or like I understand, I never will bring in those bias, that's the minute you will. And I'm all constantly being checked on ground, right? By the counter questions people will ask, or by the answers they're giving me, and it's making me constantly conscious of my own limited, myopic worldview a lot of times. Yeah, yeah.
So when you say you live with them, is that a longer pursuit, or do you mean like I just go there for a few hours? How exactly modalities, your logistics kya hoti
No,
hain?
I don't live with them. No, it's not long ethnographic work, but I might, you know, spend a couple of nights. Absolutely. Like jab Kashmir ja rahi thi and Neelam Valley, then, you know, I would spend a few nights there. And the interviews usually, I mean, they're different types. So they're one-on-one interviews. And then there's sometimes follow-up interviews, so it's more than one sitting. A lot of times they're group interviews. So a lot of women are interviewed in Neelam Valley. They were in group settings. So Atmukam mein main kaam kar rahi thi. So I went back, you know, a couple of times there. Bangladesh, of course, there was a longer trip. So I was, yeah. So it really varies. Punjab mein jitna kaam kiya, those are usually day trips. But for a lot of interviews, then I've gone back, because I've had more questions, or, you know, that one initial interaction has shown me that I thought, you know, I should interview this person about this particular thing, but maybe something else is important. So then I want to go back and say, can we actually talk about that? Yeah.
What's more important, to be authentic to that one person or to be authentic to the work in general? So let's say, agar aap, essentially, is there any fictionalizing? Ki agar aap 80 logo ka le rahi hain, would you be like, you know, maybe this anecdote from that person would fit into this person's story? So I'm sort of mixing two characters to make one character. Is there some of that fictionalizing?
Very tempting. So I think that, again, goes back to what you were saying earlier. When you translate something from the oral to the written, right? And especially long interviews. Sometimes they go for hours and hours and hours, right? And you're trying to bring some kind of chronology or some type of coherence or flow. You are moving things around. And a lot of people have written about very interesting comments on this of, you're constructing and you're reconstructing something. And I think we have to be really aware that we are doing that. So things are moving around, absolutely. But इस तरह नहीं है कि आप दो लोगों की story merge करते हैं. I think that might be really crossing that boundary. I think it is very important to be ethical, of course, But having said that, Kashmir Wali Kitab mein, yeah, some of the other work I've done where I'm not able to use people's names for security reasons, because or the interview is too sensitive. Then I have to also think about, okay, how do I tell the story without this being linked back to that person? So how, I'll have to change a few things, but that is more for their safety rather than fictionalizing, creating something entirely new. But yeah, I think just that construction and reconstruction is happening all the time when you're taking something oral and you're turning it into something written. And I try to talk a little bit about that as well during the course of my books, yeah.
So in terms of narratives, या broader narratives, वो खुद आ जाते हैं या are you conscious of a thread कि यार ये एक narrative बन रहा है throughout these oral histories that I can thread it? Is that a conscious effort, or do you look at that after you're done with the work?
I think after I'm done with the work, definitely, then some things are being raised in an interview. Then when I'm interviewing other people, I'll say, Acha, this was a very interesting thing that was raised. Can you also tell me what are your views? So sometimes, the questions will be interwoven into other interviews as well. But I think a lot of that structuring and where something goes comes afterwards. And now I also try not to bring too much coherence. And this is something I've learned over time, because a lot of times when you're documenting oral histories, you're also documenting trauma memories, right? And a lot of times those memories will come forward in fragments. They will come forward, as I was saying earlier, in silences and what cannot be said. And I'm increasingly thinking about how can I translate some of that onto the paper. So rather than forcing coherence or forcing flow or forcing narrative, where maybe it is a much more fragmented utterance, which is not a coherent narrative, how can I bring that to the book? Because that's the experience of the person. So I'm not just documenting the story, I'm also documenting how that story is being told, what is not being told, and what would be different if I was not the interviewer and it was somebody else? Like, what does it mean for Bangladeshi to speak to a Pakistani versus speaking to another Bangladeshi? So these are questions, and I'm really interested in the method and the form of it itself. So, yeah.
I think you've also studied psychotherapy, and if I'm not sure if you had done that before your first book. So how has that educated your work in terms of you're being very honest, you're recording what the other person's saying, but now maybe you're also thinking about, acha, ye trauma mind hai, acha, ye repression hai. Now you're also recognizing how the brain of the other person is doing. Has that changed the work at all?
Yes and no. So I think one thing I'm very careful about, whether it's my friends or, it's an interview setting, that I'm not pathologizing anybody. I'm not sitting
It's impossible. There. It's once you learn do teen cheezein, you're like, ye to pakka projection karta hai.
Well, yeah, sometimes that happens, and I try to be conscious of that. No, but I think it's definitely changed my work in the sense of, I did this counseling, diploma that I've done after my first book and while I was starting my work in Kashmir. And I think it felt necessary. It felt necessary because I realized again that I'm sitting with trauma memories and I'm going in, I'm not a journalist, right? I'm not going in for a story, but it can very quickly become that, right? Like I want to know the story because I want to write about it. And I'm pushing the other person to tell me their story. But the thing is that I get to leave and they do not, right? And that's a critical difference. This is their life. It is not a story for them, right? So how do I then ethically do this? I think I've become over time much more conscious of nonverbal language and communication. I try to be as conscious as possible about where not to push. So a lot of times, yes, I know, okay, if I ask this question, I may even get what I may be wanting to hear, but is that ethical or not? Like, I can see this person is really struggling. right now, and maybe this is not the ethical question to ask. It may be an important question to ask, but it's not an ethical question to ask because this could really trigger something. So that's an ongoing something I'm thinking about very much when I'm sitting in those interviews.
That's so interesting. It's like Dumbledore लोगों को मजबूर करता था उनकी मेमोरी के लिए. It'd be like नहीं, वोल्डेमॉर्ट को हराना है, तुम्हें जो भी मेमोरी हो निकालो यहाँ से. हैरी पॉटर को भी इसने यूज किया just to take out people's memories. So this is a very important thing that you've said. How do you grapple with that idea, right? Is there, let's say, even if you're talking about partition, a lot of terrible things happened, people saw a lot of terrible things, and if they come up and you do the interview and you leave, is there an ethical dilemma there कि यार अच्छा अगर ये इंसान अब उससे बाहर ना आ सके, should we offer therapy? How does that work?
Yeah, no, it is. These are all ethical questions. And I do try where possible to stay in touch with the interviewees afterwards, not as a therapist, of course, but just maintaining that contact and that relationship. It's not always possible at all, but I do try where I can. And as I mentioned, a lot of times these interviews are happening in different settings. So it's not always one time and then you just leave. Either. So you'll probably have some kind of contact and coming back, and you have to pace these things as well. I think pace is very important. But yes, I mean, I'm trying to set up something. I'm based in Toronto now, trying to set up something on oral histories over here. And one of the things I'm really thinking about is, how can you share community resources and maybe even groups that have gone through something similar. How can you share that with people if they need that after? So I think Shahzad, I'd also like to say, I think that with oral history work, with this kind of work, there is a belief that I do completely agree with, that sharing can be healing. Right. So a lot of times it's not that if you share that, you will now be overcome with that trauma and it's something, it's pulling you back into something. Yes, that can absolutely happen. A lot of times, though, it will also be cathartic for people to share. But I think it really depends on if they want to share. You can't go to somebody who is choosing not to share for whatever reason it is and push them. And force them to share. I think that is definitely an ethical question. But otherwise, people, especially with women's stories, like a lot of times they've not been heard because of notions of honor and shame, right? So it can be really important to have a witness to your story, have somebody receive that with compassion. Somebody wants to listen. So a lot of times it will actually, people will want to do that. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sure the predominant work is that. I think sharing can be healing. इसीलिए even Alcoholics Anonymous या इस तरह के जो groups होते हैं, just saying it out, acknowledging कि यार यहाँ दर्द है, वो फिर healing का process शुरू तो हो सकता है once you've acknowledged. I'm sure that's most of it. दो चीजें, एक तो state का forced amnesia है. The state wants to enforce this amnesia कि नहीं कुछ भी नहीं हुआ, चलो. But you also feel that some people, that repression is also a coping mechanism to almost see like कि नहीं ये तो कुछ भी नहीं हुआ था, ऐसा तो कुछ भी नहीं हुआ था, just as a way of survival almost.
Absolutely. I think that is very true. Or people will know. It's not like kuch bhi nahi hua tha, but they will just say, why do I need to go back there? I don't want to. Why are you taking me back there? Right? And you have to respect that. Absolutely. I think with women, something I've noticed is that because उनके एक्सपीरियंसेस डिस्काउंट किए गए हैं, या तो एमनीशिया होता है या स्टेट होमोजेनाइज भी करती है, राइट? तो आप शायद रेप की बात कर लें, अगर आप आर्मी म्यूजियम में जाएं लाहौर में, तो पार्टीशन पे जो गैलरी है उसमें इट टॉक्स अबाउट रेप, इट टॉक्स अबाउट मुस्लिम वुमेन्स रेप at the hands of Hindu and Sikh men. It doesn't talk about rape that was perpetrated by Muslims, of course. Take the one-sided है, but then also talks about women as if they're one homogenous just group. Right? And they don't have the individual personalities and experiences. So I think that one thing I notice with women is that sometimes they also internalize this notion that we were bystanders and we were not active participants. So a lot of times when you go, they'll say, "Mere bhai se baat kar le, mujhe kya pata hai?" Or "You should speak to my husband. They know, they were outside." And I think that itself is also like, sometimes it's a process of, I don't want to go there. And sometimes it's also state kind of enforced you cannot say, because if you say, then what does this mean? What does this mean for the state? But also, what does this mean for the community? What does this mean for the family? So there are lots of different reasons and different factors at play over here.
I will come back to this, but एक बहुत ही tangential point है, because I see a lot of these panels at literature festivals. Do you feel like women academics tend to even do this, where they're like, this is not my area? मैंने बहुत rarely male academics को ये बोलते हुए सुना है कि मेरा area नहीं है, मेरा research नहीं है. आप कुछ भी पूछ लें, the male academics do have an opinion on it, whereas sometimes female academics वो छोड़ देती है. Do you feel like कि academia में भी है?
I think har jagah, I think it's the research we have that women will never, are much less likely to apply for jobs where they don't meet every single criteria, whereas men are much more likely to apply even if they don't meet.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yeah, there you go. So no, I think ye hai, bilkul hai. I don't know which one is better though. I don't know if you should speak on everything. I think it's there's something very courageous about saying I actually don't know. I think maybe men need to do that more.
I think मैं just male unlearning process में, I'm like, I don't know enough, but let me still say. मैं फिर भी बता देता हूँ मेरी राय क्या है, but it's not coming from an educated place. So if we just go back to that, women's bodies पे इतना ज़्यादा, whether it's 1947, whether it's 1971, where it's almost like an organized strategy कि women's bodies पे हम जंग लड़ेंगे. So it's so interesting for women to then turn around and be like, no, we're not part of it. Whereas it's their bodies where a lot of this war or this dick measuring contest between the two nations was fought on.
Absolutely. Women's bodies have always been used to inscribe violence on. And that is a reality. But again, how do you speak about it? Some things are not speakable. That doesn't mean you don't know. That doesn't mean you've forgotten. But they're just not sayable. They're not speakable. They're not narratable. They're the non-narrated truths that you embody. Yeah. And
even there's so many stories of women of a certain village वो खुदकुशी कर रही हैं by jumping into the well, because the fear is that either the Sikhs or the Muslims will come into the village, and just to avoid that shame.
Yeah, nahin, I know. This is something I've also been thinking about more recently. कई दफा हम जब इसके बारे में बात करते हैं, it's almost like we are attributing, I don't know if agency is the right word, but this idea that women chose. And you know, we hear this a lot. I've been thinking about this, like, when your choices are so limited, is that even choice, right? Are you even choosing to kill yourself? Like, this takes me back to present day Kashmir, actually. You know, line of control pe shelling hoti rehti hai, and you know, especially if you live in Neelam Valley. So other within bunkers, I've written about this previously. There are also cases of sexual abuse. So a colleague was interviewing somebody, you know, a woman there, and she said, you know, कई दफा हमारे पास यही choice होती है कि हम जान बचाएं या इज्जत बचाएं. Now, when that is your choice, when your choice is, should I stay inside my home where the mortar shell might kill me, or should I go and seek refuge in this bunker where I might be raped or my child might be raped? Is that choice, right? So it's just something I'm thinking about more and more. Yeah.
It's even these notions of izzat which play into this, right? Where sort of अपनी इज्जत अपनी जान से ज़्यादा समझते हैं, या even this idea कि खुदा न खास्ता किसी का sexual assault हो तो उनकी इज्जत चली गई. उनकी क्या इज्जत? I mean, it's the man who's the perpetrator, who's the criminal, but somehow we assume the woman is defamed, the woman is now less respectable because of this. I know that's not the point you're making, but it just made me think about this as well. कभी-कभी हिस्ट्री में थोड़ा यूलोजाइज भी किया जाता है कि देखिए हमारी औरतें, again it's not a free choice at all, I'm not saying it is, but वो लिखते इस तरह से कि देखें कितनी bravery दिखाई, they chose death over this. Do you feel like if वो भी एक male construct से लिखा जा रहा है, and maybe again this might just be complete conjecture, but maybe it's the men who forced them to kill themselves, or maybe even push them into the well in certain cases, but wrote history like कि इन्होंने खुद किया?
Who knows? Possibly, absolutely. I know that I've interviewed people though who've said, कि हम अपनी बहनों को लेके गए to drown them, and then one of the gentlemen I interviewed, he said, "Okay, I couldn't do it at the last moment." But so a lot of times, of course, women are being forced into this, and I think ये जो notion of ये sacrifice and martyrdom भी है. For me, I don't know enough about it, but really for me, it's connected to the notion of nationalism, and nationalism for me is a very masculine space. So this idea of women sacrificing themselves for the honor of the nation, quote unquote, or for the honor of the community, that honor itself has been, inscribed on women's bodies by men. So all of this is, of course, very, very patriarchal. And I don't know whether, people have fabricated history. I'm sure that's also happened. I can't say anything about that. But ये notion of इज्जत कहाँ से आ रहा है? ये notion of sacrifice and martyrdom कहाँ से आ रहा है? एक बहुत masculine space से आ रहा है. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting that nationalism is masculine and the nation is a woman. मतलब हम धरती माँ, हमारी धरती है हमारी माँ, लेकिन फिर हम हरकतें जो करते हैं वो अल्लाह माफी करे. The reason I was saying that it might be fabricated is there are actual stories of people butchering the women कि यार अच्छा ये आने वाले हैं और अब हम गला काटेंगे सबका. वो एक ये एक्चुअल स्टोरीज हैं कि एक लिटरली आई डोंट नो लाइक अ हाउस और उसमें सबको जमा कर कर लाइन से कि इनके आने से पहले खुद मार दो सबको.
हाँ, वो बिल्कुल है, एब्सोल्युटली है, बहुत ज्यादा है, वो तो है. Yeah.
This is absolutely not your work, but you feel like कि थोड़ी reckoning होनी चाहिए थी, because let's say 1947 हो गया, एक purge है, एक free for all है, but you don't come out whole. Nobody comes out whole out of an experience like that. So if these people who raped, who killed, who massacred are now raising children, what kind of children are you raising?
Yeah, I think about this a lot as well. कि इस level पे जो violence होता है, what is the collective trauma of that, and what does collective healing look like? And I don't know. I think that now a lot more research is showing how trauma is inherited, and I think many of us carry that intergenerational trauma because a lot of these. I mean, also how do you process something of this scale? But I don't know if it's even been attempted by a lot of in a lot of places by a lot of people. So wo carry on, linger on kar raha hai and comes out in different forms and manifests differently. Yeah, there's a lot of scope for research on this. I know recently काफी on psychological impacts of partition पे किताबें भी आई हैं. There's increasing work which I'm really excited about. There's more that needs to be done.
I think pain diminish बहुत ज़्यादा होता है हमारे मुल्क में. So if somebody starts talking about the mental health effects of partition, people will turn around and be like हमारे तो गांव के 13 लोग मर गए, तुम mental health की बात कर रहे हो. So वो इतना दर्द है कि वो जब आप maybe mental health उसमें बीच में लेकर आए, people are like ये कौन सी बड़ी बात हो गई है. It's just that comparison pain which should never exist, that comparison suffering which should never exist, but unfortunately it does. Have you seen that Netflix documentary? I think it's called The Devil Next Door, where he's called the Devil of Auschwitz, and then वो बाद में मिलता है and people are like ये तो grandpa है. So after Auschwitz, this person had become this loving grandfather, and the family was like ये कर ही नहीं सकता, ये बेचारा इतना सीनाइल सा बुड्ढा. So when people look at their fathers across both दोनों or their grandfathers, what do you think? How do you think the next generation reckons with this fact कि हाँ शायद मेरे बाप या मेरे दादा ने ये किया हो, जो मुझे एक cutest इंसान in the world लगते हैं, but for a few months this is what he might have done.
I don't know if everybody thinks of that question. I know that I think it's maybe per state narrative का काफी role है that हम जो violence of partition उसके बारे में बात करते हैं, at least in Punjab where I grew up, it's part of your collective imagination. But अब one-sided violence के बारे में बात करते हैं, right? So it was always violence perpetrated by the Hindu and Sikh community on Muslims, and I think that this has also meant that reckoning of an introspection right, becomes very limited. I know that, I've spoken with PhD students in Pakistan, and jab I'll talk about rape at partition, they'll say, qatl kiya hai, but Muslimanon ne rape nahi kiya. These are PhD students. So I don't know. I'm not in a very optimistic place these days. I don't know how much of that introspection is happening.
जितना हम criticize करते हैं state narrative, Pakistan studies, it has worked because you're right. Even these little notions, right, where people were like, नहीं लाहौर में तो इतना नहीं हुआ था, and I was like, तुम model town में रहती हो. What do you think model town was? Why do you think there are mandirs in model town? How many Hindus now live in model town? How do you think that happened? कि neatly एक दिन decide हुआ इस दिन buses आएंगी और हम सब चले जाएंगे आपको? No, people. I mean, there's a very good play by Asghar Wajahat as well, जिन्हें लाहौर नहीं देखा और जमिया ही नहीं. People literally just to take property away from Hindus, and I'm sure it happened on the other side as well, massacred people in Lahore. Not even कि ये जाएं, बस कि ये इनका घर हमें मिल जाए.
So a lot of petty rivalries were played out that way, or people from the other village came and inflicted violence. But you also see that present day, right? With a lot of blasphemy cases, a lot of them are on property or other kinds of rivalries that get played out under these, these larger, yeah.
Does one need to be conscious कि अगर आप oral histories कर रहे हैं, शायद कम ही लोग हों. Even though मैंने एक documentary देखी थी, उसमें कोई पंजाब के गांव में बंदा बड़ा proudly बता रहा था कि ये मेरी तलवार है, इससे मैंने इतने मारे. But I'm assuming most people wouldn't say it out loud. कि this is what I did.
Yeah, actually, so I've done, quite a few partition interviews. I was thinking about this just the other day, that I think there have been 1 or 2 people who spoke about killing, but mostly, no, those are not the stories you hear. At least I haven't heard them. I think those stories don't come forth as easily for people. And, it is also, I do want to say that there's a lot of trauma, and there's work done on this, even as perpetrators. Like, how do you make sense of yourself, and how do you continue after you have engaged in that kind of violence? So I'm not going to say it is easy. It is something that's just completely forgotten. Just because it's not being said does not mean it has been forgotten. I think that's important to remember. These things can really play on people's conscience as well. Yeah.
So you're talking about state का जो narrative है, जो clean cut देता है. Do you feel like कि जो collective memories form हुई हैं on across the borders, they separate because state narratives separate, and we see 1947 as something great, to the extent that even if we talk about 9/11, it's a terrible tragedy. But when they build the Freedom Tower, there's also a sense of celebration. Look, we're much more than this. We're free. We stand for freedom. American exceptionalism में काफी bullshit भी है उसमें, but एक positive narrative भी दे दिया है. But that doesn't mean they don't commemorate every single life lost. The lights go up, the names are there. But when we talk about partition, you're not even allowed that. You're not even allowed that minute of silence. You're not even allowed that second of grief, because that might be seen as treason and treachery. आप positive और celebration के अलावा बात भी नहीं कर सकते. Even if you lost your family, you're not even allowed that little sense of mourning. So जो हमारे दो अलग अलग perspective हैं कि हमारे लिए वो celebration है, and India maybe sees us as a loss of a limb almost. Do you feel like collective memories जो across the border form हुई हैं, this separate because of the state narratives?
Great question. I think master narratives का बिल्कुल impact होता है at the people's level, on people's memory, but I also think it gradually हो रहा है. So if I think back to the interviews I did with partition survivors in Pakistan and then with India, I would not say that the narratives are so different, but I will say that what came forth quicker, faster, was often different. So because, as you rightly pointed out, I think Pakistan mein partition or independence and nation making kahin na kahin wo synonymous ho gaye hain, right? So partition then means triumph in a sense, because it is a making of the nation, whereas in India it is seen as the breakup of the motherland in many ways, right? And it has its own implications over there. But in Pakistan, with partition survivors, a lot of times the violence, the stories of violence would come forth very, very quickly. And nostalgia, I personally felt I had to probe for. It is there. So that is to say कि वो wipe out नहीं कर सकती state. I don't think states are ever completely successful in their national projects, and thank God for that. But like you just mentioned, it is not seen as something patriotic to say कि मैं वापस जाना चाहता हूँ, yeah, I want to see my home and that's my dying wish. It is there though. So I've recorded many interviews like that. But in India, the nostalgia will come forth a little bit quicker because the master narrative is of the breakup, and then that plays into the Muslim treachery and disloyalty and has its own very problematic and grave repercussions. So wo hai, at the partition survivors level, those memories still exist, but what comes forth quicker. But the younger children in the post-partition generations, I think this is becoming a lot more kind of crystallized, these different narratives, because now it's been almost 75 years since partition, right? So how do you see it? Can you, when I was doing these exchange projects for the Citizens Archive, and I still do them independently now, what does it mean to speak to a Hindu or a Sikh across the border when you can only imagine partition through that bloodshed, right? And you have not heard stories about your grandparents also being rescued many times, because stories of violence are also stories of rescue and protection, people risking their lives to save the other, but those stories have not always come forth. So now what does it mean to speak about the other or to the other? There's a lot more hostility. So I do worry that master narratives over time are leaving very deep imprints on collective memory, and that means that they're partitioned histories and partitioned narratives in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and that has grave consequences. But I still don't think that state narratives are ever entirely successful, because the minute you push, the minute you bring in another narrative, especially children, they're very curious, they want to learn, they're inquisitive, and they're willing to to be questioned at times as well. So I have hope there.
I think I don't, because if they do and they go on the internet looking for these answers, they might find worse answers than the state narrative itself.
Yeah, internet is no. Actually, very interesting. Thank you for pointing this out. So India may history is taught differently, and until grade 10, itna zyada, it's actually till partition, and then there's not much after that. So unless you opt for history or political science in your higher education, you may not actually be studying about a lot of things. And at first sight, you might think that, okay, maybe that's good because it's the hatred, and this is pre-BJP. I know textbooks are going under revision right now. So maybe shayad itni hatred nahi padhai ja rahi, but what I noticed was that because of a vacuum hai, children still have those questions, but where are they going to go? So a lot of times they will go to social media or to these particular blogs that have their own kind of hostile narratives, or to the media, to mainstream media, to news, and so they're still holding on to these stereotypes. Vacuum will be usurped by something or the other. So and that can be very dangerous. I do agree with you there.
So like you were even talking about, jinki lived memories hai, they have context. So even if the state tries saying something, they have context कि नहीं, हम जहाँ रहते थे, हमारी जिंदगी इस तरह से थी. We people who are growing up and have taught this linear narrative which never exists in history, but somehow उसको package करके मोहम्मद बिन कासिम आया, फिर तो हम मुगल थे, फिर ये बुरे लोग आ गए, अब वापस हम आ गए. And I think probably the worst thing we do is not teach any decolonialism. British criticism तो होता ही नहीं हमारी history में. India is seen as the enemy, which sort of British को by design है या by chance है, get out of jail free card मिल जाता है. But we don't see that's not how history played out. I think 2001 के बाद हमारे western front पे we had to confront to this idea where people are like, wait, Durand line border है, हम तो हमारे घर वाले उधर रहते हैं, हम तो इधर रहते हैं, हम तो आते जाते रहते थे. So till 65, a lot of people who were living on the borders lived like that. अब तो pigeon भी चली जाए तो it's a national crisis. But they didn't conceive of that nation state या imagined community जिसको Benedict Anderson कहता है, जो state या top level पर enforce करना चाह रहे थे.
नहीं, बिल्कुल, I completely agree with you, and I think it's independence, but because we don't teach British, colonial history, so it becomes independence from quote unquote Hindu India. Right now, so that's a fundamental problem, and absolutely till 65 war tak, especially there was a lot of crossover. People, borders were a lot more porous. These things have become more hardened over time. And मुझसे काफी दफा लोग पूछते हैं, even when they see Pakistan ka map with erstwhile East Pakistan and West Pakistan and this division, and I know that it seems really absurd today. right? But I'm very cautious with calling it absurd, because I think when you do, you make 1971 inevitable. And if you treat it as inevitable, then there's no introspection. Hona hi tha, to phir ho gaya. But kaise hua, kyun hua, what was the, what was the role of the Pakistani state and policies? We don't introspect on that. So I think that it was actually not so absurd, because borders and partition was imagined very differently. You even have like Jinnah left his home in Mumbai locked. I don't think it was imagined that you will never be able to cross over. And it wasn't like that in the initial years either. Now it's become like that. So now the idea of 1,000 miles of India in between East and West Pakistan seems ridiculous. But even at the people's level, this is a story I've quoted a lot. But I remember interviewing this one woman, and she said, "मेरा ख्याल था partition का मतलब है कि मैं गर्मियों में अम्बाला में आम खाऊंगी और सर्दियों में सरगोदा में oranges खाऊंगी." So I think it was, a lot of people left their homes locked overnight because of the violence, and they thought they were going to go back, and they could never go back. It remains their dying wish. So बहुत हमने रीइमेजिन और रिकंस्ट्रक्ट उसको किया है, पार्टीशन को भी और बॉर्डर्स को भी।
मुझे रिसेंटली किसी ने ये कहा, एंड आई वाज लाइक दिस इज वेरी गुड फूड फॉर थॉट। मैंने खुद नहीं रिसर्च किया, बट somebody said के partition was not even afforded to people of a certain class. So if you were poor in India or Pakistan, you still need, ठीक है, you could have a small house or something. And Pakistan में I'm sure you face this as well. It's almost become a joke कि जो आता है वो बोलते हैं हमारे तो इंडिया में महल थे, हम तो उधर के मुगल थे। ऐसा कोई नहीं बोलता कि हम रोड पे रहते थे, वहां से यहाँ पे आ गए। एवरीबडी मेक्स इट सीम लाइक कि हम ही राजा थे और हम छोड़कर आए हैं। बट यू फील लाइक देयर इज एनी ट्रूथ टू दिस, दैट टू अ सर्टेन क्लास just even packing up and leaving, that wasn't even an option? They were too poor to even do that. So only people of certain class could even afford packing up and leaving.
I think partition absolutely impacted people across different social classes very differently. I think it just manifested differently for them, in the sense that some people were able to fly or take a train, and other people walked. So I interviewed somebody who walked for over a month. Right. So I think it played out differently for people based on the privilege that you had. And this then, of course, applies to caste and to other identities as well. So who had privilege and who did not. I think people did have to leave. Where there was violence, they had to flee. But how they, flee, and whether they had any protection or not, वो फिर obviously depend करता है on your privilege. Yeah.
So you mentioned 71 as well. I think India में एक greater India का बहुत concept है, but greater Pakistan, almost like you laugh when people say that when they mention East Pakistan, और ये कुछ petty बुड्ढे हैं जो अभी last December were also like East Pakistan, and I think in 2021 if you're calling Bangladesh East Pakistan, mean to come off your high horse. But do you feel like जो हमारी greater Pakistan की articulation है, it's only done as a response to the greater India articulation, and as such हमारे memory में या हमारी notion में currently that idea that this was Pakistan almost doesn't exist. I don't think Pakistan, even like a child Pakistani as such, considers or even remembers that Bangladesh was one part of Pakistan.
Yeah, I think nationalism, so dono ki, they're pitted against each other and defined in opposition to each other, and they're always responding to each other. So wo to hai ki Pakistan will respond to Indian nationalism and Indian narrative. But yes, absolutely. I know, for instance, even when I was growing up, right, like 71 or Bangladesh was at the periphery of my imagination. मुझे एक बहुत simple सा narrative I still remember, growing up with, that India and Pakistan की दो जंगें हुई, and एक हम जीत गए, एक वो जीत गए, बस.
हम कौन सी जीते?
65, because we have that narrative, of course, right? So, and that's it. It was brushed away. And it's the same thing with younger school children today, because I was teaching in Pakistan. O levels में कुछ बेहतर हैं किताबें that they focus on it a little bit more than the government textbooks, but even there, by the time you give your exam and after the summer you come to the next class, most students have forgotten because अब वो rote learning या आप for passing your exam तो आप ठीक है थोड़ा बहुत सीख लेंगे, but other than that, does it register? Does it register what happened? Do we know that history? No, it has been silenced. It has in many ways been erased, and it's been replaced with new histories. I won't say कि complete erasure है, because I think 71, I think sometimes I didn't realize this till I did this book, that we underestimate the importance of 1971 in South Asia, not just in terms of the trauma and the violence, but also in terms of how it has shaped regional relationships and Pakistan's own self-identity, its educational policies, its military policies, and all of that. I do think कि वो complete erasure इसलिए नहीं है कि forgotten. It is defining, right? But what we choose to remember, what is permitted in that remembrance is very, very limited, myopic, and of course distorted. Yeah.
I think there's also a rise in insecurity. A lot of these things, जो हम ideology की बात करते हैं, a lot of that work was done post 71. So even the idea of Muhammad bin Qasim as the first Muslim, which is untrue, उनसे पहले भी यहाँ पे इस्लाम था, but we needed a militant entry of Islam into Pakistan or into this region. So a lot of that work of ideology and replacing history with ideology was done post 1971.
Why though, right? I mean, that's an interesting question. Like, why would we need to do that? Because you have to rehabilitate nationalism.
Yeah.
And how do you do that after, a huge part of your country is no longer part of your country? They fought for the liberation, right? How do you do that? So then you have to construct, of course, and you have to revise textbooks. And I think it pehle se tha absolutely this anti-Hindu slant in our textbooks. It has a long history, but it definitely accelerates after that. And the idea of Muslim versus Hindu also accelerates, because 1971 till present day is taught as an Indian or a Hindu conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
And it is—
So is 71, yeah.
Yeah, 1971, absolutely. Yeah. So it's an Indian or Hindu conspiracy. It is presented as a revenge for 1947. So going back to this idea of breaking up India, it is seen as India's revenge for partition. And so textbooks get revised, and a lot of other policies get revised as well. I really think that the learning from 1971, if there is any, was never again. Never again. We should have been stronger, mightier, rather than introspecting on the very, very flawed, is a very light word to use, military policies. The reaction was that we should have been stronger, mightier.
Yeah.
What do we mean when we say that, when so many people were killed by state violence? So yeah.
I forgot, but किसी ने कहा भी था ये कि वो तो हमसे दूर थे, बीच में इंडिया था, ये बलोच और पश्तून जो हैं ये तो यहीं पर हैं. And Musharraf said things like and Ali Usman Kasmi keeps quoting this as well, कि हम तो, हमारे पास ऐसी टेक्नोलॉजी है कि हम ड्रोन्स मारेंगे और बॉम्ब मारेंगे और आपको पता भी नहीं चलेगा. So yes, you're absolutely right. I think हमने बिल्कुल ही गलत लेसन सीखा. And एक हो सकता है tacit understanding हो, obviously nobody will ever come out and say it, but that two nation theory की एटलीस्ट वीकनिंग हो जाती है 1971 के बाद कि वेट, अगर हम मुसलमान थे और हमें अलग नेशन चाहिए, अब तो नहीं है, अब तो 3 नेशंस हैं यहाँ पर. सो दैट ग्रून नॉर्म चेंजिंग, तो एक डेस्परेशन ऑफ कि अब इस बॉर्डर्स को और बंकर डाउन करो, अब दैट इनसिक्योरिटी के कुछ और ना हो जाए. Then we had to come up with these notions. No, Pakistan always existed. Pakistan wasn't born in 1947. The moment Muhammad bin Qasim stepped, Pakistan was created. So trying to find justification for Pakistan in this region, I think that insecurity led to this nationalization project.
Yeah, absolutely. The सारी चीजें बहुत escalate हुई कि Pakistan, Bangladesh's creation is not the demise of Pakistan in a sense, because Pakistan is not about a territory. It is an idea much larger to that. I mean, these were notions that were already present, very much so, but after 1971, they take on a new meaning and new importance to de-link it to territory in that sense. So वो बिल्कुल हुआ, and yeah, here we are.
इसमें रेसिज्म कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है, बिकॉज हमने कभी बंगालियों दैट कॉलोनियल आइडिया, एंड ये पंजाब में थोड़ा ज्यादा है, बट they've always considered Bengali is less than.
Yeah. This comes from, again, the colonial notion, the martial race theory, that Punjabis are considered the martial race and Bengalis were considered the non-martial race. And there were, all this racial discourse that was deployed, the idea that the, Bengalis were weaker, smaller, shorter. These are all like derogatory language being used, being seen as lazy. And that's why I actually think the idea of Bangladesh being created, it is, I'm borrowing from this Haitian anthropologist, Trillo, who says it is unthinkable history. I think it remained unthinkable that these people who in your discourse you see as inferior can fight for their liberation and they can win. Right? And that remains unthinkable. The only way you can justify it is by saying, nahi, India ga involve na hota to ye kabhi hona hi nahi tha. So then the whole discourse becomes about India. And that is a very problematic because it becomes another bilateral Indo-Pak conflict, right? And Bengalis are almost ejected from that narrative. We see it as a third Indo-Pak war. This is something that's very much resented in Bangladesh, actually, that this was a people struggle. And, even in India, the grand narrative of India defeating the Pakistan army and Pakistan's own narrative, right? In both of those, the Bengalis are the ones that, and of course, other ethnic minorities, indigenous people, they get overshadowed in that narrative, in this hegemonic narrative. Yeah.
Even in the iconography, right? The pictures are Indian army, Pakistan army. Is there any truth to this? Ke General Niazi was also like, कि हम India को surrender दे देंगे, हम बंगालियों को नहीं देंगे.
हाँ, इस पे भी काफी काम हुआ है. Bangladeshis have worked on it as well. Naeem Mohammed, he was at the conference that took place recently at NYU as well on the surrender photograph, and I'd encourage everybody to read that work. But yes, this idea that again, just seeing it through the frame of India, Pakistan, Bengalis ko hum kis tarah, how could they win? I think is something that remains just very difficult to come to terms with. Yeah, so if you go to museums, you look at textbooks, the focus will be on the India narrative. Baki cheezein, even for instance, the language movement in textbooks is mentioned as the very last point. So I saw this debate on social media recently, कि कौन कहता है कि textbooks में 71 नहीं है, textbooks में तो 71 है, और हम बड़ा introspect भी कर रहे हैं, और हम इन चीज़ों पे बात भी कर रहे हैं. I think हमें समझने की बहुत ज़रूरत है. Something I've learned more recently is कि silencing सिर्फ erasure के through नहीं होती. Erasure is not the only way of silencing, right? There are different techniques that can be used, and there are different techniques that are used when it comes to 71 in Pakistan. एक तो एक number game इस्तेमाल होती है, right? आप एक community के जो violence है उसको maximize कर देते हैं, दूसरी community का minimize कर देते हैं, and then you say that look, violence was on both sides. एक तो neutralize हो गया, and if you want to talk about violence, well, you can talk about this violence, but you can't talk about this violence. Right? You can't talk about state-led violence. एक तो वो है. And the second thing is that आप कुछ चीजों को foreground करते हैं, कुछ चीजों को background कर देते हैं. ठीक है, आपने mention किया है, but it is almost like a footnote, right? Central focus आपने किस चीज पे किया है? That remains India in these textbooks. So I think वो एक तरीका है, and then there are multiple other ways as well. But I think it's just important to remember कि it is not कि बिल्कुल ही कभी mention ही नहीं किया. बिल्कुल 71 को हम mention करते हैं, हम उसको भूल नहीं सकते. 50 साल हुए हैं सिर्फ. It is very much there in our collective memory also, in our state narrative also. But what are we speaking about? What are we permitted to remember? And how does the parameter of how do the parameters of what we can remember also define the parameters of what cannot be remembered and what cannot be said? That's something.
I mean, जो लोग ये argue करते हैं उनसे पूछें कि कैसी लगी आपको लम्स में कॉन्फ्रेंस हुई 1971 में, सारे स्कॉलर्स आए, how was that? So if nobody is silencing, जिस कॉन्फ्रेंस की आप बात कर रहे हैं वो NYU ने क्यों होस्ट की और वो लम्स ने क्यों नहीं होस्ट की? And Musharraf Zaidi also had a great tweet on this, that people who make these decisions also shoot themselves in the foot. Originally Lums was hosting the conference, maybe they would have had a smaller audience. Now eventually when NYU hosted, they have a bigger, larger global audience. So if your idea was to keep this under wraps or silence this, you've only managed to amplify their voices even more.
People who are going to talk about it are going to talk about it. So yeah.
हाँ बस वो हम ना करें ना, हम अपने घर में जिसको सप्रेस कर सकते हैं, जिसको चुप कर सकते हैं वो कर लें, बाहर जिसको जो बोलना है। आई डोंट नो व्हाट द प्लान इज, कि नॉर्थ कोरिया बना देंगे, इंटरनेट एक्सेस छोड़ देंगे? हाउ कैन यू पॉसिबली नॉट रिमेम्बर? आई मीन, बट ये बहुत लोगों ने पूछे फैक्चुअल द नंबर्स दैट you're saying. A lot of people were like, can you factually objectively tell us how many people were killed? And I think the 3 million figure is revered in Bangladesh, and हमारे Munir report में 50 to 70,000 or something like that, I think, if I'm not.
The One Commission report mentions 26,000, and but I think this question itself, like, what do we want to do with these numbers? Is the point of numbers, using numbers to say that the violence wasn't bad or the violence wasn't genocide? Because I think that's how numbers are used. So I'm very cautious about those questions in themselves and where they're coming from. Yeah.
I think वो genocide को आप number से describe करते हैं ना, कि यार ये genocide इतनी number थी, whereas genocide is not numbers as such. Like for instance, अगर शिया genocide पाकिस्तान में हो रही है या हज़ारा genocide हो रही है, I would still call it genocide because they're being targeted and killed specifically because they're Hazaras. So if an entire state, which in that moment was against its own people, is targeting people specifically for being of a certain community, that's pretty much genocide.
Yeah, I mean, it's targeted killing, it's cleansing, and I mean, there is a definition of genocide. If anyone's interested, you just have to Google that, right? But I think also within definitions, we have to always know that there are limitations to definitions as well, and people's experiences cannot be so neatly packaged in to these categories. So the whole question of like, if it meets this number, then we can call it this, otherwise we cannot. I mean, sure, if you want to get into that theoretical argument of definitions, I mean, that is very different. But if in that process, you want to discount what happened to people. So I think, like, I've been saying this recently, like, when you inflict violence on somebody, there's that violence. And then when there's a denial of that violence, for me, I'm increasingly thinking about this, it's another form of violence. Right? So if you want to use numbers to deny or discount or trivialize somebody's pain and suffering, right? Then I have a lot of questions about that.
I think murders, killings, genocide भी शायद हम accept कर लें. I think जो चीज़ तो बोली भी नहीं जा सकती is the notion of the organized rape. Yeah. I think वहाँ पढ़े लिखे लोग भी पाकिस्तान में, they're like, we can't accept this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we don't at all address or talk about. Oral histories में आता है कहीं ना कहीं, I think again there's a big difference between master narratives and efforts at the state level to homogenize the narrative or the erasure of 1971, and then obviously people are people, and history is never homogeneous, and it will always vary. And there are also people who were living in, erstwhile East Pakistan, present day Bangladesh, prior to 1971. They had relationships with, Bengali people. So their memories and their experiences, some of them were there during 1971. So you will find all other kinds of, narratives as well. You also, I think, mujhe nahi pata tha, but within Pakistan as well, it was a very small movement, but there was a movement of resistance during 1971 against the military, military action as it's called. And there were poets involved. There were people even within the army. There were other activists, and many of them continued to write. So it's not something that finished in 1971. So wo bhi, I think, it's important to remember that as we're talking about these master narratives, within the civilian population, hamesha, I think, resistance hoti hai. And I really wish that more and more of us, I wish I knew that sooner, because I think it's something that gives you a lot of, courage, I think, as well. That through the most difficult of times, there have been people who went to jail, people were arrested, but they did it. So
it's who our heroes are, right? Like Tikka Khan या Yahya Khan या Niazi या असद उमर के जो डैड है मोहम्मद उमर, जिन पे बाद में करप्शन चार्ज भी हुआ था. These are our heroes and people जो conscientious objectors थे. They're forgotten to history. Whereas Air Force में भी कुछ लोग थे जिनको झूठ बोला गया that you're bombing India, you're not bombing Bangladesh. And that's the only way they could come to terms with that, because ठीक है हम हिंदुओं को बॉम्ब कर रहे हैं, but they couldn't even fathom कि हम अपने लोगों को क्यों बॉम्ब कर रहे हैं. So yeah, who we decide to make our heroes. And ये एक बहुत अजीब सवाल है. I don't think you might have an answer for this, but I've been thinking about this. I even wrote a very short play. I'll send it to you after this. It's called The Inherited Journey. It's on the same anecdote. Waiting for Godot की तरह का है, but it's a short play. कि 47 में the people who migrated east, a lot of them migrated west back into India in 71, and then they had to go back. So that search for home, कि वो कहीं कभी मिलेगा नहीं और वो सर्च में ही आप रहेंगे. जिस तरह परसूट ऑफ हैप्पीनेस होती है, वो परसूट ही कर सकते हैं, आप मिल नहीं सकती, उसी तरह की. बट डू यू थिंक देयर इज एनी ट्रूथ टू दिस आइडिया कि you have a connection to your land? So if you're displaced, it's not that simple कि अगर आप लखनऊ से कराची आ जाएंगे, you can take all that culture and come. कुछ आपके अंदर, you lose something when you lose that connection to the land, even if you're the next generation. So if you're a displaced community, you lose something.
Absolutely. I think you absolutely lose something. And I think a lot of partition survivors, other people are very aware of that. The children feel it too. Like a lot of times, you know, children, younger people will say, okay, I remember school holidays, may everybody had somewhere to go back to. They would say, hum apne gaon ja rahe hain, ya hum apne, you know, wherever city we're going to. But I had never had any place to go because what was, you know, what was our ancestral place was now, you know, in a hostile country, quote unquote, seen as, perceived as, right? So I think वो बिल्कुल loss होता है over time. Loss of language भी होती है, loss of heritage भी होती है. Like a lot of the Sikh community, I'm very happy about the Kartarpur corridor, but they have been longing for years, right, to come. So there's so much that's lost, both the tangible and the intangible. Also, just the idea of not being able to go back. There's a difference when you choose and, you know, you relocate. Many people do that, and you know, you can always go back and visit whatever is home for you. There's a big difference between that and being told that the ties have been severed and you can never look back, you can never go back. That is that kind of uprooting. I mean, imagine if that happened to us today. You can never go back. It happens to so many people on going around the world, everywhere, you know.
I think 3-4 और ऐसी podcast हो जाए, it will happen to me जिस तरह, because I still live in Karachi. It still might. Allah na करे, Allah बचाए हम सबको. So when you do these oral narratives in Bangladesh, do you get a sense that they ever felt an ownership over the idea of Pakistan? Because the way they were treated, जिस तरह आपने पहले भी जिक्र किया कि हमें लगता है बस इंडिया ने plan बनाया 1971 में and Bangladesh came to be. We never talk about how we treated them 1947 to 71. And ये भी शायद थोड़ी खतरनाक बात हो, but Quaid-e-Azam going there and saying कि नहीं, Bengali will not be the national language, Urdu will be the national language, जबकि कोई ताल्लुक नहीं उनका. उधर ज़्यादा homogeneous population थी, something like 99% spoke Bengali. Why would you enforce Urdu on them? So that Bengali identity crystallizing into Bengali sovereignty. What are people's history of 47 to 71? Did they feel like they were equal parts of this nation? Did they feel home?
Yeah, so I can't speak for everybody, but I'll tell you what I've learned and the interviews that I've done. I think एक बहुत important चीज़ है that we don't remember this a lot in Pakistan, that East Bengal, present-day Bangladesh, played a critical role in the formation of Pakistan. The 1946 elections, and you know, I mean, Muslim League is founded in Dhaka. मैं जब ये बच्चों से पूछती हूँ, so they have no idea, school children in Pakistan, where was Muslim League found? Dhaka is the last place on earth that they will probably name. Unfortunately, right, there's been an erasure of that history. So जहाँ तक वो बात है कि did they feel an ownership over Pakistan? I think many of them did. You know, for different reasons, their own reasons for supporting partition. You know, a lot of people say it was not so much the two-nation theory there, but economic reasons. Whatever those were, there was a support for the Muslim League, and there was a lot of belief and hope resting in the idea of Pakistan, this idea of emancipation, this idea of empowerment. And I also think that when you record people's histories, you realize that history books mein to ye kuch dates hoti hain, right, in which these key events take place, but for people those shifts happen at very different moments. Yeah. So I know that for, you know, within the same family, maybe some of the younger generation, like jo bacche the, you know, who were involved in the student activism, for them the idea of Bangladesh took place earlier, than it did for their parents and grandparents who may have really supported the Pakistan movement, because it was very hard to let go of that idea also of, you know, this struggle and this belief in Pakistan, and you know, the fact that their rights were being violated. So ek wo hai, I think we need to start with that idea. That's where I think that treating it as inevitable from a Pakistani perspective is very problematic. Yes, in Bangladesh, a lot of people will now, like, I think 47 is not really spoken about there, 1947 partition, because 71 has taken much more importance. 1952 language movement, where, you know, students are killed, that becomes a very important marker as well. 47 is not so important. But yeah, so I think from their perspective, you know, partition is seen as a delay in the actual emancipation for a lot of people. But as a Pakistani, to treat it as inevitable is very problematic, because then you're ignoring this long history of Muslim League in Bengal and the support the Pakistan movement had. And I think that's very critical to start with, because then you need to inquire, well, what happened between 47 and 71?
I think maybe a better way of phrasing would be what West Pakistani state did 1947 till 1971. That made it inevitable. Not that it was an inevitability of history, but हम जो कर रहे थे वो sustainable नहीं था. वो 71 में होता, 72 में होता, 81 में होता, वो होना ही होना था.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, but so when it comes to now looking back at that history, there are different moments, right? Like 1965, voice the language movement, of course, from 48 and 52 students are killed. So that is a really important part of that history, and this feeling of not being treated as equal, right? And being denied that right, the linguistic right. And I think language is also more than just about language, it's also about culture. We know that, for instance, like Tagore was banned at some point as well. So it is also about, yeah, right? It's about so much more.
मुल्क को हम अलामा इकबाल को नेशनल पोएट बनाया हुआ, आप टैगोर बैन कर रहे हैं, मे बी इसलिए that people don't realize how much better of a poet Tagore is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of banning, and I mean, you know, Tagore, somebody who also wrote against the idea of nationalism, but then he becomes this nationalistic hero almost because he's being banned. You know, so I would just want to say that language is a lot more than, it's very symbolic. It is very culturally rooted. So the 1965 war may as well, you know, East Pakistan, which was then East Pakistan, of course, was not protected. So that also created a lot of feelings, and the multiple other things. I don't want to get into the whole history of it, but there are multiple other moments that are happening, and people are being reminded that they don't really belong. You know, I interviewed some Bengalis who had come to Lahore for education, and they would talk about kind of the everyday discrimination and the things that would be said to them and about them. So these are constantly happening, and then, you know, the elections and then the transfer of power, and things really then get heated and escalated. But there's a long history of that. It didn't happen overnight. There's a whole build up to what happened in 71. Yeah.
अभी मैं recently डॉक्टर इल्हान नाज की सुन रहा था एक पॉडकास्ट उजैर के साथ, जो है प्लीज सुने जाकर. तो he was talking about कि हमारे बजट्स कभी pro poor इसलिए नहीं होते because we still think of our economy as extractive. We still have that colonial construct कि इनसे extract करना है wealth और लेके जानी है. So that's how we treated West Bengal. So even when we talk about decade of development, Ayub Khan, yes, you extracted all that wealth, all that they were producing, and then you didn't give them anything. There are a lot of these small anecdotes as well. कि I think Yahya Khan को जब बोला गया कि ये टॉयलेट फिक्सचर्स कहीं से आए, ये आप डिवाइड करें, he was like नहीं, बंगाली तो पत्तों से धोते हैं. Even these little things, right, in Pakistan you'll be like ये 2 टके की चीज है. I don't think a lot of people have questioned why you call it 2 टके का. Why is taka considered nothing? Yeah, because Bangladesh. Something I didn't even know. Bonga is a word you say to somebody who's stupid in Pakistan. Hey, bonga aadmi hai. That's a racial slur against Bengal, people from Bangladesh. I didn't even know that till quite recently. So a lot of these cultural notions, जो आप उनको less than समझते हैं, resources नहीं देते हैं, तो there's only so much you can push people or repress people till it rises. Do you feel like we haven't learned those lessons and we're making the same mistakes in KPK and Balochistan and Sindh even to a certain extent?
I think that if you look, when I say that there's a focus on India, that does not mean that India was not involved in the war. India was involved in the war, right? But when that becomes the be all and end all of the conversation, right? Then you are not looking at your own internal policies. Forget, I mean, I'm not even talking about the state-led violence in 1971. I'm talking about everything that happened before that as well, right? You are just not coming to terms with that. And if you don't come to terms with that, of course, you're going to keep seeing that being played out. I mean, our past, no matter how much anyone tries, cannot be erased. Your past will continue to haunt you and play out in your present day politics. And I think that's also important to remember that Bengali asking for these rights, right? Like there are also other movements, ethnic movements for rights, essentially. This all began with the question of rights, right? Whether it's Sindhi rights or Balochi rights or Pashtun rights, right? So, and I think that question, for some reason, that question or that movement for rights is so threatening. And then the response is to repress it, and or then to use these terms like Indian state-sponsored terrorism. And I think this is very dangerous, and it is not something that only Pakistan is doing. Of course, India does this in Kashmir all the time, right? Legitimate movements for rights become painted as Pakistan state-sponsored terrorism or Indian state-sponsored terrorism. And it's such a heavy label. Firstly, the minute you use terrorism, you're depoliticizing, in a sense, the movement, right? You're saying it's a terrorist movement. That's it. The discourse ends over there. So what are you doing to those genuine struggles, to those genuine experiences, to people's voices under these big labels you're imposing? So I think that continues, absolutely. And I think that 71 ke baad, we've only seen more and more of that, this tit for tat, battle. Yeah, that's why, like I said at the beginning, I realized how much of what is happening in Kashmir today kind of goes back to 1971. Yeah.
It's that two large colonial legacies, India, Pakistan ki jo hain, bureaucracy or military. It's using Bangladesh as a pawn between a war between them. It's using Kashmir as a pawn. कि उन लोगों की तो कोई agency नहीं है. Even when maybe Pakistan में नारेबाजी के हद तक लोग कहते हैं कि आज़ाद होगा कश्मीर, I don't think the state is interested in an independent Kashmir. I don't think Pakistan is going to give up Gilgit-Baltistan. India ने तो pretty much occupy ही कर लिया है. So those Kashmiri people are the ones who have the least agency and voice in this, and they should be the ones who should have the most agency and voice. So ये colonial construct की वजह से हमने उल्टा निज़ाम बनाया हुआ है.
Yeah, absolutely. And the settler colonialism continues. Yeah, absolutely.
The equation of violence की जो आपने बात की थी बहुत interesting है, because even when people in Pakistan now talk about Balochis being targeted, there is a response which says तो कोयटा में कुछ पंजाबी जाते हैं, they're also killed for being Punjabi, so एक ही बात है. And I never really equated that idea कि oh, this is what is happening. They're trying to equate कि violence on the good people on both sides for यहाँ पर.
Yeah. I think very interesting चीज़ है, because I think about अभी the discourse that was happening on social media. A lot of Pakistanis engaged in it. Palestine में जो हो रहा था, the violence over there, या कश्मीर में जो हो रहा है, the violence over there. उस वक्त we are cognizant of the fact that state-backed violence, right, and any violence carried out by individual groups, by people, cannot be equated. Absolutely 100% agree with that, right? You can't equate Israel, state-backed violence against Palestinian people, because that's what happens. Like that's what happens on TV and mainstream discourse, that आप उनको equate करें कि वो भी तो violence करते हैं, तो what choice does the Israeli state have? No, you cannot equate state machinery-led violence, right, with people's violence at all, ever. But when it comes to Pakistan, when it comes to our own internal issues, we're not able to use that same framework, right? We then start to equate. We then start to say that, Balochi people also resort to violence. So, maybe it's justified. What can the state do? So the minute you equate those two, state violence and people's violence, then there's a big fundamental problem with that. And then I want to ask, why don't you extend that to Kashmir? You don't, because that Indian state violence cannot be equated with a young Kashmiri boy picking up a stone or picking up a gun. We know that, and that's absolutely true. It cannot be equated. But it also cannot be equated within Pakistan then. So this equation is fundamentally problematic. Yeah.
यहाँ पे आपको ideological divide भी नजर आता है. That's so ironic that even people who are champion of, well, probably not them, but a lot of these bucks जिनको कहते हैं social media पे, they became very pro-Israel just because it was seen as a Muslim-Jewish conflict, which also is reducing that conflict. So that Indian social media support for Israel was also strange. कि ये क्या कर रहे हैं आप?
It's not even strange. It's appalling. It's appalling that you can endorse state violence on any, population, regardless of your politics, regardless of anything else. It's appalling.
But it's that same, right? कि BLA की अगर आप एक तस्वीर दिखा दें, for instance, think of the worst thing that's happened. Our 9/11 is APS. We never really questioned what our strategy was post APS. So if we started bombing people, अगर हम इस तरह की तस्वीरें देखते हैं कि कितने कैलस लोग हैं कि इसराइल में बच्चे बॉम्ब साइन कर रहे हैं before they're dropped. We did that post APS. Bombs were signed, pictures were taken. It was said this is in memory of them, and bombs were dropped. I don't know how many people died. I don't know what happened, but हमारी acceptance थी. I think that was celebrated in Pakistan. Similarly, when it comes to Kashmir, the idea कि इनमें से कुछ लोग terrorists हैं, वो सब जस्टिफाई कर देता है. स्टोन पेलेटिंग भी जस्टिफाई कर देती है, वो वायलेंस भी जस्टिफाई कर देती है, वो इंटरनेट ना होना भी जस्टिफाई कर देती है, वो ऑक्यूपेशन भी जस्टिफाई कर देती है. जस्ट द आइडिया कि 3-4 यहाँ टेररिस्ट हैं.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say.
I also had a very tangential point earlier on when you're talking about Bangladesh and our histories. It's so interesting कि हम जब पाकिस्तान की बात करते हैं, we keep trying to find a reason for existence of Pakistan in history. Whereas when we talk about 71, we don't say that. We don't say कि इनकी तो पहले से कोई भी identity थी. Pakistani identity has always existed, and somehow in our minds, Bangladesh was born out of nowhere in 1971.
Out of the Indian conspiracy. Yeah. And, I mean, when I was growing up, and I think a lot of school children still believe this today based on my conversations, that I was under the impression that Bangladesh had a, Hindu majority. And the reason I say this is because I think post-partition in India and in Pakistan, there's been an equation between religious identity and national identity, right? So a lot of Hindus in Pakistan today will be called Indians, would be referred to as Indians, right? Muslims in India will be told to go back, right? And all other kinds of, derogatory, language is used. So the idea that if East Pakistan had a majority Hindu population, या जैसे हमें बताया जाता है कि the culture was so influenced by Hinduism, in a sense, then what it's doing is it's almost creating this justification that if they were always Hindu, then they were closer to India than they were to Pakistan. And so then obviously this had to happen, and then India played its part. And in fact, even we're in textbooks, repeatedly this narrative of Hindu teachers corrupting and molding the mind of Bengali youth. So वो हमने वो इतना ज़्यादा वो cemented है frame, of seeing this as an Indian Hindu conspiracy and the two being equated. So Hindu Bengalis just being seen as Indians, right? And therefore being seen as anti-Pakistan because they're pro an enemy state. So हम उससे, I think, unfortunately बाहर नहीं निकले. And then when we are willing to talk about the violence, like if you go into the army museums today, जो recently inaugurate हुए हैं, उसमें बल्कि gallery है पूरी 71 पे. So again, not an erasure, but other than, you have a whole wall covered in this plaque saying Indian state-sponsored terrorism. So उधर भी वो इस्तेमाल हुआ जा रहा है, and then we are using the term genocide now, but we are only talking about genocide, and I quote here, for pro-Pakistanis, so people who supported the Pakistan army, the violence that they experienced. So these are the 2-3 things that we are willing to focus on. India का क्या role था, जो non-Bengali population थी, उनके ऊपर या क्या तशद्दुद हुआ, violence हुआ, and in terms of dates, we are also willing to look at everything that happened before March 25th, which is the night that the operation was launched, the military operation, and everything after that kind of just fast forwards, and then you just get Bangladesh's creation in 71, December 16th.
I think Operation Searchlight was also launched at a university and teachers were targeted. सबसे पहले जो पहली रात थी of violence, I forgot exactly कौन सी university थी. So वो भी by
Universities.
design होता है. So even यहाँ पे communities हम देखते हैं कि leaders और teachers और academics जब target होते हैं वो by design हो रहा होता है. So you've done work in Punjab, you've done work in Kashmir, you've done work in Bangladesh. Do you feel that notions of identity, एक तो वो idea है कि colonial construct है that you can be only one, you can't be three identities, you can't be four identities, form पे बस एक ही चीज भरनी है. और maybe in this region, whether it's gender identity, whether it's sexual identity, whether it's national identity, whether it's even linguistic identity, उर्दू को फोर्स करने की जरूरत नहीं थी बिकॉज हमारी लिंग्विस्टिक आइडेंटिटीज हमेशा से मल्टीपल थी. सो इट्स अ लॉट मोर फ्लूइड. बट व्हेन यू डू दिस वर्क, डू यू फील लाइक पंजाब ने थोड़ा रेडिली अडॉप्ट कर ली दैट पाकिस्तान आइडेंटिटी, इवन टू द एक्सटेंट ऑफ रेलिगेटिंग द पंजाबी आइडेंटिटी, पंजाबी लैंग्वेज को रेलिगेट किया गया. So those notions of identity, how do you think they differ between talking to people in Punjab, Kashmir and Bangladesh?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I think Punjab is a curious case in the sense of it's been at the forefront of Pakistani nationalism. And so in some ways it's kind of had to shun its own Punjabi culture. And usme language bahut zyada compromise hui hai. Like I was not taught Punjabi because, you know, it's considered quote unquote as not cultured, not civilized. And we know recently in the past few years, I think hua tha school ka case where they sent out a circular. Yeah, they sent out a circular and usme, you know, they said don't use foul language. And I think one of the examples given was Punjabi. So I think, of course, it's maybe a resistance movement here. There are Punjabis, you know, who protest and who resist this and who are talking about the importance of language. वो हमेशा I think homogeneous कभी भी कुछ भी नहीं होता, वो तो है. But Kashmir में and Bangladesh में, of course, I mean, I don't even think I can give a small answer because the things are so complicated, but it's very, very different. Bangladesh mein, I know now one of the new questions is also how, you know, how do you bring into the fold of narrative and discourse the indigenous people, Chakma people, you know, other ethnic minorities in Bangladesh. There's also a movement on the civil society front to recognize jo violence hua tha, you know, on non-Bengalis as well. Again, not equating, you can't equate, you can't equalize. But so I think there are questions of this, like, you know, what does it mean to be Bangladeshi? Can it be reduced to only Bengali, right? What happens then to other people? In Kashmir, of course, it's a very different question because this Pakistani or Indian identity for a lot of people has been superimposed by these nation states as well. So then, you know, how does Kashmiri identity come out in response to that? But I think within these, you know, broader identities, like you mentioned yourself, like gender and, you know, all of those other layers come in as well. So, yeah.
I mean, don't give a small answer. Please do give a long answer. Nadeem Zaman उस panel पे भी argue कर रहे थे कि Bangladeshi identity crystallized into Bangladeshi sovereignty. So that, do you feel like they have a stronger sense of their own identity, which I'm not to say we didn't, but हमने थोड़ा ज़्यादा readily Pakistan project accept कर लिया था. And I get that कि pre-partition Bengal was at the forefront, and mainly the biggest contention between Congress and Quaid-e-Azam was also the division of the provinces, Punjab, Bengal being the big ones. And वो बिल्कुल एक अलग discussion है कि उसमें क्या मसले मसाइल थे, Quaid-e-Azam क्या argue कर रहे थे. Let's not get into that. But notions of Bangladeshi identity, do you feel like 47 to 71, because they were being repressed, there was a reaffirmation of that identity?
I think वो तो होता है जब भी repression होती है, you hold on to identity much more, right? So absolutely, Bengali language and culture, that is something that, I mean, if you compare it to Punjab में वो बिल्कुल ही उसको, you know, we consider it as, again, uncultured, uncivilized. So वो तो absolutely है, there's a celebration of that. But then there are also other questions, like I'm saying, you know, like, how does Bangladeshi and Bengali kind of collapse into one identity? And what happens if you're not non-Bengali Bangladeshi? So I did interview some people who were married, like Punjabi married to a Bengali. So what does that mean post 1971? You know, in terms of your identity, in terms of how the nation state sees you. We know that the, you know, thousands of Urdu-speaking population, some of them who still are waiting for Pakistan to repatriate them. They continue to live in refugee camps. So I just mean that there are lots of other questions that have been raised post 1971, like they have been raised within Pakistan. I think these questions don't get resolved, right? Like, आप जितना भी खेलें कि एक पाकिस्तानी nationalism that you have to subscribe to, you will always have ethnic identities contesting that idea. So that resistance will be there. I think that resistance is also there in Pakistan, within Pakistan too. Yeah.
But it's not just some people reaffirming or reasserting, right? जिसमें बीच में आपने भी कहा, मैं recently Twitter पे cancel हो गया था because I said something very similar. I said कि मेरी भी personal tragedy है that I've been kept from my own history. I've been kept from my own people because I was not taught Sindhi. I went to O levels, A levels, even though metric उसमें पढ़ाई जाती है, वो एक बहुत दूसरी debate हो जाएगी कि क्यों पढ़ाई जाती है, उसको नहीं लेते. But I don't have that connection, right? Growing up, when I thought of great plays, great poetry, I only had white people in mind. I thought Shakespeare was the greatest writer of all time. मैंने तो नहीं बिठाई पढ़ा था. अब आकर जब मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ to connect back, there was a part of me that was completely lost to me. And I blame the state for the nationalization project कि उन्होंने जानबूझकर एक rupture create किया है of identity. And people were like, you're blaming the state unnecessarily. And I was like, no, it absolutely is the nationalization project. हमें ये कनोली वाले incident में नजर तो आ जाता है कि English supremacy क्या है. But we don't ever really question that 3 classes हैं. English के बाद उर्दू भी आती है. So if you're somebody who's from a village in Punjab or Sindh or KP or Baluchistan and you can't speak Urdu, आपके पास भी कम, आपकी resources, आपकी opportunities कम हो जाती हैं because but a lot of people on Twitter are of a certain class. They haven't faced that discrimination, so they're less likely to accept that.
Yeah, no, I think this erasure of your mother tongue, of your language, again, like I was saying with Bengali, it is symbolic of much more than language, because when you take away somebody's language, you're taking away poetry, you're taking away other forms of expression, right? It is, you're taking away a culture, essentially. Right?
And it also ingrains that idea of inferiority complex, right? कि अगर आप slavery कर रहे हैं, आप colonize कर रहे हैं, you're taking away somebody's identity, you're taking away somebody's agency to enslave them. Whereas इसकी जरूरत नहीं है अब, but अगर आप लोगों को बताते हैं कि हर चीज गोरी ही अच्छी थी, whereas Bulle Shah was more progressive than their poets in their times. But if you can't even read Bulle Shah, let alone understand his philosophy, you will keep thinking कि हम तो सारे जाहिल लोग हैं.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And your work, sorry, go for it.
No, I was going to say, if I can just actually read something that Dr. Tariq Rahman said about language, but it might take me a minute to just find the right page. So Dr. Tariq Rahman, he said, language is a way of communication, but it is also a symbol of identity. It communicates more than words. It communicates a people. And if you look down upon a language, there are many things that you don't want to do using it. You don't want to speak in it. If you speak in it, you make no effort to correct your pronunciation. You don't want to hear it. If you hear it, you make no effort to understand it. These are the various ways in which you are given cues that your language is not worthy. The linguistic ideology is such that if you value a language, you will try your best to speak it, read its literature, to pronounce it as well as the native speakers, and make all efforts to try and understand it. Even when Bengali was declared a national language, it continued to only be used there in East Pakistan and not here in West Pakistan. So it wasn't national in that sense. And when West Pakistanis went to East Pakistan, they never learned Bangla. And if they did, they spoke it like Englishmen, arrogant Englishmen. Obviously, the Bengalis didn't like this. If you speak their language only to give them commands, it means you're treating them like servants. So I think this just captures, a lot of what we've been talking about for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Abhi recently Saraiki पे बहुत debate भी हो रही है, and Shahram had a great point that it's also political what you decide is a language. So the erasure of Saraiki identity is कि नहीं ये तो dialect है, ये language है ही नहीं.
Absolutely.
So when is the language a language? People are also asking about the apology? Do you feel like, well, I mean, of course we should, but what's your take on this entire idea that हमारी truth and reconciliation के लिए apology बहुत जरूरी है?
Okay, so here's what I'll say. I think that this is interesting that this question and comes up in a lot of conversations between Pakistanis. I would like to say firstly that I think when violence is inflicted on somebody, what they want should hold paramount importance. So what I think as a Pakistani, or what any of us think as Pakistanis, is probably far less important. That's the first thing I will say. The second thing is that a lot of times people will say कि apology पहले भी की गई है, and yes, you know, in different forms, different ways, regret and remorse has been expressed, right? But I also think it's important to remember that initially when regret was expressed, there was hope that the Hamoud Rahman Commission report was going to lead to some justice, which did not happen, as we know, that never was made fully public, right? So there is a strong demand for an apology. But for me, as a Pakistani, if I can say something, I think that before apology comes acknowledgement, right? If you don't acknowledge, and if you have not come to terms with that history, then any apology, remorse, or regret kind of remains very, very hollow. What is that going to do? Right? So I think the bigger work, like as Pakistanis, if we want to have this conversation, then I think the bigger kind of like work and the focus and the effort needs to be invested in how do we acknowledge and come to terms with what happened, right? And not deny it, not erase it. That's a prerequisite to any apology, for that apology to mean something. If you are still, you know, framing it as just something that India did to you, if you're not willing to look at your own policies and your own practices, then what does an apology even do? What does it even mean in that context? So that's something I think is important to highlight. And the other is that I think that, again, if somebody has suffered and they are asking for something, then that is far more important than what I think or what anybody else thinks, right? You have inflicted violence and then you have denied that violence. Apology essentially is an acknowledgement, is a recognition of the large-scale violence and the ways in which people continue to suffer in Bangladesh. And I don't know why there's so much hesitation to do that. I think it's because we have not acknowledged. So maybe that's where the work lies. Yeah.
It also helps अपना किबला दुरुस्त करने के लिए कि अगर आप खुद भी अगर acknowledge कर रहे हैं. I mean, if you go to Germany, we had a theater exchange with the school I was working in and a school in Germany. Those kids at a very young age are taught about Nazi Germany. So when they say never again, they make sure that the worst of Hitler is taught to every child so that hopefully no other child turns out to be Hitler in that country. तो हम जब पढ़ाएंगे और बताएंगे कि हमारे विलन्स कौन थे और बुरे लोग कौन थे, maybe we'll start recognizing how many of those still exist, and maybe that's the fear.
बिल्कुल. I think अगर acknowledgement का, you know, if that process even starts, it is critical for Pakistan itself, like you're saying. हमारे लिए वो बहुत important है. It is not a favor. It is a critical process we need to go through.
बीच में जब हम लैंग्वेज की बात कर रहे थे, I also want you to address this because a lot of times we feel गाँव में सब लोग जाहिल होते हैं, urban centers में तो liberals ही liberals भरे हुए हैं, but your work sort of shows that brainwashing जो है वो शायद urban centers में hate ज़्यादा internalize की हुई है लोगों ने और गाँव में शायद इतनी नहीं है.
I think this is interesting because it comes back to the education system, right? तो वो education के through आप क्या indoctrinate कर रहे हैं, वो promote कर रहे हैं hatred, hate sentiment, otherization. When you go to villages, a lot of urban notions are then questioned. You know, a lot of times people will not be preoccupied with the same morality and moral questions that urban middle class is kind of concerned and preoccupied with. So wo bilkul hai. I think getting outside of Lahore and getting outside of urban centers and doing this work has shown me and challenged so many of my own preconceived notions. Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, I think just even like women, you know, are working in in rural areas, they have to work. Their engagement with work is very different. The concerns are very, very different as well. In Kashmir, women in the villages that I was working in are leading protests, right? They're leading the peace movement. So there's just so many other lenses through which we need to see the world, and step beyond our own perspectives. That is so essential. Yeah.
I think you also even talk about a Mela in Kasur where people are just celebrating across the borders.
Because borders are very interesting. हम usually Wagah border imagine करते हैं when we think of borders, and there's all that whole ceremony that takes place. But in a lot of other places, borders are not like, there are a row of plants and stuff separating the two sides. Of course, ranges here, there you can't cross over. That's very dangerous. But for people living in border areas, especially 65, the crossover hota rehta tha. So borders are not imagined in the same way. And the other quote unquote is not also, figment of your imagination. You actually see people working in the fields across from you. And ye mela until recently ho raha tha in Kasur, and Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh pilgrims would come together at the shrine, which was at the border. Pehle I think Indians ko aane dete hain, and then Pakistanis ko. And there's one interview I did. Somebody actually met family members through that mela. They connected through that. I've also documented other stories of meeting at the border being the only place in which you can momentarily reunite. Of course, line of control, Neelam Valley jo hai Kashmir mein, in the winter months. Up to social media is more kind of present, but pehle, in the winter months, the river would kind of shrink, people would sit on both sides and speak to one another. So borders, again, also have very different meanings in different places. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people who imagine कि बड़ी कोई border wall बनी हुई है, there's so much cattle and livestock जो cross कर देता है, फिर हमें दोनों को लिख के देने पड़ते हैं हमारी गायें वापस कर दें please. And sometimes it's just so funny, these ideas, right? कि वो fisherman पकड़ लिए क्यों? क्योंकि वो पानी अब उनका शुरू हो जाता है. It's just how are you drawing a line in the sea? How are like गाय बकरियों को आप किस तरह समझा रहे हैं कि कहाँ border है? So I've also visited India, and I think जब Sikh और Hindu specifically Pakistan आते हैं, there's a lot of this idea about कोई उनसे पैसे नहीं लेता, and there's a lot of kindness. And then people ask me, did you face the same thing so I went to Delhi primarily. And I was like, not really. And then I was thinking about it, and then I was like, I don't stand out. So if I'm walking in Delhi, I don't think people look at me and think Pakistani. Whereas maybe in Lahore, if you're Indian, you stand out a lot more, so people recognize you. So I don't think I was recognized as Pakistani when I was on the metro. Was your experience similar?
My experience has been different in the sense that a lot of times I've traveled across the borders for work, and so people know the interactions I'm also going into. If I'm going in and doing an interview, तो लोगों को पता होता है. But schools में मैं नहीं बताती बच्चों को. Usually, whenever I go anywhere, I like to have them guess, and usually never are they able to guess Pakistan, because वो notions ही ऐसे होते हैं about each other, that it takes them a while, and then I tell them I'm from Pakistan. It's a very interesting response and reaction. So
I think Bollywood ने भी तबाह कर दिया है ना, because you don't walk in with like आदाब, हम पाकिस्तान से आए.
Bilkul, yeah, the Muslim portrayal, of Bollywood. And then, of course, Pakistan, maybe when I took kids across with me for Citizens Archives program, so they also were expecting कि जैसे Star Plus के dramas होते हैं, सब उन्हीं हवेली में रहते होंगे, and, will be wearing the same kind of jewelry. And so they were also shocked कि नहीं, ये तो they look like us. So I think that crossing over is so.
Where all did you go?
I've been to Delhi, I've been to Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata, Chandigarh, Agra. Yeah.
Don't you feel कि अगर आप लाहौर में कोई सो रहा हो और उसको कोई shift कर दे like a prank and wakes up in Delhi, the person wouldn't even know they're in a separate city?
Yeah, in many ways, absolutely, absolutely. And I also think, we talk about a lot of similarities between Lahore and Delhi, but there are also similarities between Karachi and Delhi because of the migrant populations kind of going across, right? So, wo bhi hai. Whenever I go there, like people want to know about Lahore, people want to know about Karachi. Many of them have moved from these places. So there's so much.
I think Karachi और Bombay के ज़्यादा parallels draw होते हैं.
Usually draw होते हैं, but I just find it interesting because a lot of people move from Karachi, you know, and a lot of people move from Delhi to Karachi. So वो भी है. Like I think Karachi में Delhi colony है.
Delhi वाले is a full पूरी community वहाँ पर. खाना बहुत अच्छा पकाते हैं. And even Delhi में जो जामिया मस्जिद के around निज़ाम कबाब and all of that, it's so similar to architecture को ले लें बादशाही मस्जिद और उसके around खाना लोग. हाँ, I know कि मैं partition हुई भी नहीं, मेरे अंदर longing पैदा हो रही है, so I can only imagine what people you know who suffered went through, and the work that you're doing is absolutely stellar. I think we really need to record this. ये भी stories हैं, ये भी कहानियां हैं. So I also want to ask you personal questions. वो ये हैं कि मैं करना चाह रहा हूँ, अभी 14th August आ रही है, like a podcast where I interview people and get their stories. So what should I be mindful of? What should I think about when I'm doing this?
Are you thinking of speaking with partition survivors?
Yes, and doing like a podcast, like with दोनों side पे stories आ जाएं.
Yeah. I think just if I don't know if I'm in a place to give you any
advice. Of course you are. Who else is? You are the
No,
Howard Zinn of Pakistan.
Oh gosh, no, not at all. No, but I think that just let them tell you what they want to tell you. I think that's the best advice I can give anybody. So, tell them, what this day means ask them what this day means to them, and whatever comes forth, whatever they want to share. I think there's just the things you were talking about earlier, not pushing, if whatever comes forth, that's important. I think that sometimes we get so hung up on actually getting the story that we don't realize that it's also really important. What are people choosing to share? What are people choosing to remember? What have they held on to 74 years after partition? That is value in itself, right? So I'm just always really curious about, okay, if they're coming to this podcast, that means they want to speak about it. Well, what do they want to share? What remains important to them 74 years on? So yeah, I think you'll get some really moving, incredible stories. Yeah.
The best review we've received is on Apple Podcast, which says genuinely curious conversations. I was like, इससे अच्छा compliment नहीं हो सकता. And a lot of times we undervalue certain things, but things like empathy, when you talk to somebody, having that empathy, recognizing that humanity, these things go a long way, especially when the state's interests lie in dehumanizing. What's next, Anna? Kashmir ho gaya, 71 ho gaya, 47 ho gaya.
I'm working on a new book these days. It is fiction. I'm trying. I'm going to see if that takes me anywhere. But it's on mob violence. It's on post-partition violence. And I'm using the color red to talk about anything that is taboo or prohibited in society. So what happens when red is cited? And there are a few reasons why I wanted to write this as fiction and do this in this way where I'm not talking about a particular community or particular form of taboo, but more generally, because I think that stories that come out of South Asia often get packaged as, oh, these Pakistanis or these Indians. And I think this violence is beyond South Asia in many ways, right? So whether it is, lynchings that happen on accusations of eating beef in India, or lynchings that happen on accusations of blasphemy in Pakistan, right? Or the long history of lynchings that have happened against Black people on Black bodies in North America, or the more recent cases here in Canada where 3 generations of a family were killed by a 20-year-old white man who did not want to see this symbol of, hijab or head covering on shalwar kameez in what was seen as a white space. What happens when red intrudes, and what happens when, some kind of taboo or prohibition intrudes, and what you feel is your space or what you feel is sacred. So those are some notions I'm trying to explore, and let's see where that takes me. Yeah.
I mean, ये बहुत एक लंबा और discussion हो जाएगा, and I know I've taken a lot of your time, so I'm not going to go into it, but I think it's worth mentioning कि literature में भी कितनी power होती है. Manto tells you as much about partition as any objective history of partition would.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think it also gives a layer of protection to people, especially when you're talking about issues like blasphemy or others. So I think there's also that fiction can be really powerful in multiple ways. So I'm just seeing what it does for me. We'll see. Yeah.
I'm quite excited. I think it'll be great because even आपका जो non-fiction काम होता है, it inspired. I don't know, the writing style maybe is not that academically verbose for the sake of it, which sometimes makes it inaccessible. Your work is very accessible, which is generally seen as a quality of fiction as opposed to non-fiction.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward. कॉम को कोई आप मैसेज देना चाहेंगी? एक इंसान है जो हमारी हर पॉडकास्ट पे एक ही सवाल पूछते हैं, Is there any hope? Is there any hope? Anam?
I get asked this question at the end of most of my talks, and I feel really bad because I'm not in a very
No,
optimistic.
but the reason it is asked at the end is to pressurize you into saying something hopeful. So
I know.
like if somebody says, is there any hope? And you're like, no, the ocean is burning. So वो एक बहुत sad end हो जाएगा.
I know. Okay, so let me try. नहीं, hope है, बिल्कुल.
बहुत 2 किलो hope पड़ी हुई है.
As you can tell, I'm not doing a good job telling this. I have to be hopeful, right? I mean, that's why I'm continuing to do the work I do. You are doing the work that you do. Everybody, I think, so many people are engaged in really, really brilliant work. We are continuing to do that because we hope that it does something, it shifts something in some small way. So I think वो है, and I get very hopeful when I speak to young students. बिल्कुल stereotypes होते हैं, distortions भी बहुत ज़्यादा हैं जो internalize हो चुकी हैं. But I also see what happens, when you kind of bring in other material for them to engage with. I also see what happens when young Indians and Pakistanis speak to each other. I always love to share this anecdote. It's been with me for years, so I'll do that here as well. I was doing a Skype exchange with students in Mumbai, I think 7th grade, and like 20-30 minutes into the conversation, one of the students got up and said, now I know not all Pakistanis are murderers. I can think of going there too. Now, let me give a disclaimer. There are many misconceptions and stereotypes that my Pakistani students have about India as well. But what you see is that they go from this place of, I don't want to speak, often to saying, when is this going to happen again? When can we speak to each other again? So I do feel like there's a lot of power in dialogue, and with technology now, I think it can be leveraged in different ways to make this kind of communication possible, to make conversations like this possible. So I'm really hopeful about that.
You feel it's because of social media? Because I'm finding myself doing this as well, that you have to hedge it and do the both sides. I talk a lot more or criticize Pakistan a lot more because I live in Pakistan. बट क्योंकि फिर लोग आपको इतना लेबल करते हैं, आई सॉर्ट ऑफ हैव टू आल्सो बी लाइक, नहीं अच्छा फिलिस्तीन में हो रहा है, कश्मीर में भी हो रहा है, बलूचिस्तान में भी हो रहा है. Do you feel like you also need to hedge yourself because people see you as a Pakistani?
I think it is. Yeah, I also think it's really problematic because you can't equalize, and you shouldn't have to, because of very different things that are happening, and you don't want to neutralize. We were talking about numbers. You don't ever want to neutralize, but I do worry that social media pe things get appropriated. So I will share this. Last 16th December, the one that just passed, there were things that were taken from my book by these troll accounts on Twitter, misquoting things out of context, trying to draw an equation between, APS and 16 December, which we know happens a lot, right? So I always worry about how content is selectively taken and appropriated and then presented to further hate and further nationalistic narrative. And it's something I struggle with because I write about topics like this. If I'm writing about the Pakistani side of the line of control, I'm in no way saying that what's happening, on the other side of the line of control is okay or justified or the same, not at all. But it can sometimes be appropriated that way. So I do worry, and I think social media पे जगह ही इतनी कम होती है, proper discourse ही नहीं हो सकता, तो वो किस तरह आपका comment lift होगा and use hoga, and when it furthers something that I feel so strongly against, then it's hurtful, and it's just so I think it's very problematic as well what social media does.
It's a cesspool of filth. I don't think, I mean, you can think about it, and it's good that you do, but can anyone really do anything to stop their content being appropriated?
You can't. Because then I think, right, should I stop telling these stories because I know they will be appropriated? Should I not say it? Should I not talk about the Pakistani side of the line?
That's what they want.
I'm not equating, I'm not equalizing, not at all. I'm just bringing another narrative into the discussion, should I not do that? Silence the answer. So I don't know. I don't think so. But that appropriation will happen.
I think academia में भी तो होता है. where new scholars are like, this person used this lens, this is why it was wrong, just to publish certain papers. But I think those conversations are important. If you don't have those conversations, the thing doesn't go forward. History कुछ science का formula नहीं है कि 2+2 मिल गया तो 4 है. People will keep discovering different colors of this mosaic. Thank you so much, Anam. It was such a pleasure talking to you. It didn't feel like I was talking to you for the first time.
Likewise, it was really, really nice being in conversation. I love what you're doing. Thank you for doing this.
I love what you're doing. And Joe, is there any hope tha? I think यही hope है. That I see a lot of Indians commenting. I see a lot of people from Bangladesh commenting. Jitna people to people exchange hoga and people see each other as human beings, that would help. I think Fawad Khan going to Bollywood really helped because Indians were like, अच्छा nuclear bomb तो मारेंगे लेकिन फवाद खान वहाँ रहता है, इतना खूबसूरत आदमी है. Who would want to nuke Fawad Khan? So maybe we need a lot more Fawad Khans to make this world a better place. Thank you so much, Anam, and thank you everybody listening. Take care. Bye bye.